Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share alien and extraterrestrial encounter stories. First story. This story was shared by you/Agent Wrights. The Extraterrestrial Detective. Recording 1. Having completed my studies of medicine in the year 2000, I was attached to my local hospital as an assistant surgeon. My joy was short-lived, however. In the year 2001, I lost everything. I was on my way to work one fine morning and was met with a car accident. I was spared my life, but I had severe nerve damage and that put an end on my career as a surgeon. I was broken and became a wreck of a man. I became withdrawn from any forms of society and didn't go to work. I survived as best as I could with a monthly allowance of $500 from the hospital. Worn with pain and exhausted from the harsh monotone of a hermit's lonely life, I decided to book a cabin in the forest of Dean. The cabin was old but sparingly comfortable for a heap of a man to enjoy the beauty and splendor of the forest. I had brought my telescope along to gaze at the starry night sky and to learn about stargazing. On the night of December 17, 2001, I was staring at the Andromeda constellation. The night was calm and peaceful, yet I felt uneasy. It was a gut feeling that was screaming to me that something was out in the wild. Something dangerous. As I continued staring at the sky, I saw a streak going across the sky. It was a comet that was shimmering emerald and was headed directly towards Earth. I ripped my eye away from the telescope and looked at the comet, spellbound. It was no more than a few kilometers above the Earth. It gained speed as it moved towards the ground and smashed into the forest of Dean. I was brought out of the spell as the comet hit the ground and produced a large shockwave. The shockwave the comet produced was so strong that I was pushed to the floor and the entire cabin rattled. I could hear the distressed cries of several birds and animals as they all struggled to run away from the green comet that was lying no more than a kilometer away from me. I must admit I was frightened beyond wits, but there was this overpowering curiosity to find out what this thing was. I moved slowly and cautiously toward the comet and held a kitchen knife in my hand. It took me a painful 30 minutes to reach the source of the disruption. As I moved towards the comet, I heard several screeching noises. They were extremely loud and caused ringing in my ears. I gripped the knife more tightly as I ventured towards the comet. All my instincts were screaming for me to turn and hobble away. When I reached it, my eyes widened in horror and I dropped my knife. The comet was right there and it had turned from a shimmering green to purple. It was a small comet, no more than 10 meters wide and 6 meters long. But that wasn't what terrified me. It was the tentacles. The tentacles were the ones producing the horrible screeching noise and were digging furiously into the ground. The screeching was the most horrible thing I had ever heard. I could feel the screeching inside me. The screaming was so violent that I bent down on my knees and tried to clamp my ear. The horrible voices reminded me of the screeching of tires, the terrible screeching of tires. I lost all hope in that moment. I slumped onto the ground and was about to just give up, when suddenly the screeching stopped. I looked at the comet. It was still furiously burrowing into the ground. There was a huge hole forming in the middle of the pod. And from that gash, something materialized, a few tentacles which were shining, and some purple liquid. It was as though the comet was bleeding. The liquid was thick and was pouring out from the gash. The liquid was floating above the ground and moving as though it was alive. The horrible liquid was destroying any life it was hovering over. Wild flowers and mushrooms quickly died as the substance poured over them. It was moving fast towards me. In that instant, my desire to live became so overpoweringly strong that I jumped up with strength, surprising myself. I started running away from the comet with energy that I couldn't have had. Any sign of my nerve damage was gone as I started sprinting away from the horrible alien creature. Its presence in the forest was causing a disturbance to all life around it. The trees were now a violent clash of purple, red and deep blue. Suddenly I heard the rustling of leaves behind me and immediately turned around. There was an immaculately dressed man with a black suit on. He had a pin of the letter P on his suit. He couldn't have been there a second ago. He checked his watch and groaned. Too late, he declared to himself. He spotted me hidden behind a tree and shot me a quizzical look, as though he was surprised by my presence. He signaled to me to keep quiet and exited from his hiding spot behind the trees and moved slowly towards the alien. As soon as he came out from behind the tree, everything became quiet, as though time had frozen. The wind stopped blowing, the leaves and all the birds and animals suddenly went silent. It was as though someone had put ear mufflers over the entire forest. The alien was shaking its tentacles scarily at the man. He retrieved a small green dagger from his suit and eyed the alien. Both of them judged each other silently, and the alien grumbled something. To me it was a bunch of nonsense, but the man seemed to understand something. Then, suddenly at the same moment, both of them rushed towards each other. The alien's tentacles were wildly snatching at the man, but he skillfully dodged the attacks and rushed towards the alien. The whipping tentacles were smashing onto the ground and creating huge holes in the ground. The man was holding up surprisingly well against an alien. The purple liquid had almost no effect on him. He stepped through it as though it were water. I stood in quiet amazement of his skills when a tentacle grabbed his leg and he fell to the ground. Even from where I stood, I could see that his shoulder was dislocated. The alien seemed to have won the battle as the man tried crawling towards his green dagger, but the tentacle monstrosity kept pushing him to the side. I knew in that moment that the alien would destroy him if I didn't do something. Against all logic, I ran towards the knife, knowing that somehow, that would help the man. The alien paid no attention to me, seemingly engrossed in the man, who had so skillfully dodged its attacks, interested in him as though wondering how he had come so close to it. I stealthily crept up near the tentacle holding the man. As I was about to stab the tentacle, it sensed my presence and let go of the man and grabbed me. The man slumped to the ground, barely alive. I threw the knife towards him, praying as hard as I could that he could somehow get me out of this. The tentacle grabbed me, and for the second time that night I felt all the hope sucked out of me. My worst memories kept jumping out at me. The car swerved and tried to avoid me, but its desperate attempt to slow down was not enough as I was sent hurtling through the air. I was living my worst nightmare in slow motion and was aware of tears running down my cheek. I knew I had to come out of this creature's trance, but how? I focused all my energy on my best memory, the day I had graduated from medical school. I tried to focus on my parents' faces as they clapped for me. I felt the beast's grip loosen. I opened my eyes. The man was hobbling towards the alien's open hole where I could now see a pulsating black ball. Darkness seemed to emanate from the ball, corrupting the surrounding air. The man was lifting the dagger up in the air and with all his energy slammed the dagger into the ball. Light burst out of the ball. Strong, overpowering light. The tentacles let me go and started writhing around. The ball was vibrating now. I knew it was going to burst. The man was still slumped against the comet, seemingly unconscious. I limped towards him. I knew I wasn't going to be able to save him, but what kind of doctor would I be if I didn't try? As soon as I reached the man, the vibrations of the ball became stronger. I started pulling him away, but I was too late. The ball burst and I was thrown sideways. I was slammed into the ground and lost consciousness. I came to hours later. It was morning already. There was no trace of the comet anywhere. The trees had turned back to their original colors. The man was still slumped against a tree. He had evidently woken up before me and tried to get up before passing out again. I tried crawling towards him, my memory of last night still fresh in my mind. When I reached him, I was relieved to see him still breathing. He had a dislocated shoulder, which I had seen several times when frantic parents brought their children into the A&E. I gently moved the shoulder around until it popped back in place. The man woke up with a jolt, shocking me. "Thanks," he said and gave me a small smile. The man definitely knew what that thing was last night, and I intended to find out. I cautiously asked him, "What was that thing last night?" "Armado legumen," he replied. "A what?" "Armado legumen. A extraterrestrial pod-dwelling creature that relies on a person's emotions to survive. Not many people survive an attack by it." "How did you do it?" "Do what?" "Resist it. The creature cannot be stopped. Only some of the world's strongest minds can resist a mind reader of that magnitude." "I don't know." "A mind reader? Wait, who are you?" "My name is Popple Graham, but you can call me Agent P. I am an extraterrestrial detective, the only one in the world, I would assume. I have spent nearly 20 years hunting down these creatures. They are the attempts of the galaxy to unravel itself. They exist only to destroy life. That creature attacks its victims by reading its victims' minds, causing them to feel utter despair, making them easier to kill. One of my contacts had informed me that there was one was going to arrive on this date, and I rushed here as soon as I could. But alas, I was too late. These things are better to destroy when they haven't planted themselves to the ground yet. Anyway, thanks for your help. I better be on my way now." He brushed himself off and started walking away. As he was walking away, I felt small, incomplete. The revelation that we were not alone in the universe was startling to me, and I wanted to see more. What did I have to lose anyway? "Wait!" I yelled after him. He turned around with a smile. "Let me guess, you want to come with me since you have nothing left to do here, after your recent accident?" I stared at him. "How did you know? Are you a mind reader as well? You were able to treat my wounds. Therefore, you are of a medical past. But you are camping here in the forest of Dean. Your hands are shaking. You have nerve damage. Your beard is unkempt, suggesting it hasn't been taken care of for the last few months. What does that all suggest? A medical man, who has been in an accident and is trying to recover from his own self-created pit of despair. Impressive. But can I come with you? I must warn you, it is a dangerous hobby to be seeking out and destroying the universe's worst creations. You will have to let go of all of your family and friends, for their own sake." How cliché, I thought to myself. I had nothing left to lose, so I nodded at him. "Well then, follow me. You are going to have to train hard and long if you want to stand a chance against any of the monsters. What happened last night took skill, I'll admit, but you got lucky," he said. "Sure," I replied, stung. He led me out of the forest to a small house on Seville Road. The small two-floor building opened up to a huge inside which looked like a circular library with a huge training space in the middle. "You need a name if you're going to be saving the world," he said, once we were inside and seated on the couches. "My name is Mark Smith, but you can call me Agent M," I replied with a smile. "Agent M, sounds good," he replied. "My name is Agent M and these are the recordings of my works in saving the world." Second story. This story was shared by you/Richard Saxon. 42 years ago we sent Voyager 1 into space to look for extraterrestrial life. Today we found it. 42 years, 6 months and 3 days ago, on the 5th of September, 1977, a space probe was launched from Earth, and sent on an endless journey through space. The probe, which was affectionately named Voyager 1, contains a multitude of information regarding humanity, including our language, our art, and in a more metaphorical way, our souls. Today, the little machine is 22 billion kilometers away from Earth, the furthest reach of our species, though not a manned vessel, it's still a part of us. Despite its distance, we're still keeping contact with it, and during its journey spanning almost half a century, it has given us an insight into the mysteries of the universe we thought we could only dream about. My own father spent most of his life on the project, and I have since followed in his footsteps. I dreamed about taking over his work even as a 12-year-old kid, and eventually, these dreams would land me at NASA's doorstep. Little did I know, that only a few years into my work, the one question that has plagued us since the dawn of mankind, would be answered, forever changing the course of human history. Are we alone? On the 7th of December, 2019, I arrived to the office after having been called in at 4 in the morning. I immediately noticed the panic that had erupted overnight, with my coworkers scurrying around the office, confused, horrified, but seemingly excited about a picture sent from Voyager 1. The monitors that usually displayed little more than numbers and boring graphs, now all showed the same, singular image, that of a blue planet. I approached one of the screens, and studied the photograph. In many ways, the planet resembled Earth, with vast blue oceans, and split land masses, but none of the continents were recognizable to me, and the clouds hovering above were red, with a vague, yellow tint. "Hey, Dan, what's this?" I asked my neighboring coworker. At first he barely noticed my presence, too engrossed in his own work as he stared at the screen with a mixture of terror and anticipation. "Hey, what's the picture?" I repeated. "It came from Voyager 1, he said, barely a whisper. It was a ludicrous statement. The last image sent from Voyager 1 had been received in 1990, the famous pale blue dot. An image we posted on the wall of our office for inspiration. Since that fateful day, our engineers turned the camera off to save the probe's memory, assuring we could still receive more valuable data in the future. "Don't be stupid, that's impossible," I said, "they turned the camera off decades ago." Something turned it back on," he said with a shaky voice. His choice of words confused me. Instead of indicating that a person had done it, he said, "something." "What do you mean? How is that even possible?" "I don't know, but the signal that turned it on came from the planet on the picture. It overrode the system, effectively hijacking the probe." I looked back at the picture, noting its bright surface, an impossible image without a nearby star to light it up, but according to all available data, Voyager 1 should have been several light-years away from the nearest star. "The signal came from within the Oort cloud," Dan mumbled. "Excuse me. I know, it's 300 years ahead of schedule. We rechecked it 5 times, it doesn't make any sense." Before I could ask any further questions, my supervisor called me into the main office. There, he showed me the transmission we'd received from Voyager 1. Apparently it wasn't just the picture, but a sequence of numbers and codes hidden within the radio signal. Do you know what it means? I asked after listening to the mess of sounds about 10 times. Well, that's why we called you in. We were hoping your father left behind any ideas about his work, before he passed away. My dad was a magnificent man, brilliant in his own way, but obsessed with finding the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Throughout the past century, Earth has picked up a multitude of different radio signals, most of them just an after effect from collapsing stars and random background radiation. However, among the mess of noise, several coherent messages have been filtered out from the symphony of the universe. The only problem was that we had no means with which to translate them. My father never could, he could only determine their origin, which fit perfectly with the current location of Voyager 1. Then it dawned on me that the last message, coming from Voyager 1, wasn't just another random signal sent from a thus far unknown planet, but a mathematical key that could be used to translate everything we'd received so far. My theory was that the species that had hijacked the probe had used it to understand our language, instructions of sorts. We spent the next few days deciphering the message, desperately looking for the key. It took a lot of sleepless nights and countless amounts of caffeine, but eventually we found the answer. Without hesitation, we applied the decoder to all previous messages originating from the same region. The first one having arrived in 1968. Though we had what was essentially an alien dictionary, the language they used contained so many foreign concepts, ideas we still don't understand, but what follows is the basics of what we've deciphered so far. December 7, 1968, is there anyone out there? March 15, 2003, help, help, help. October 23, 2010, they are here. September 19, 2011, we did our best, sorry. Though the direct messages didn't make much sense on their own. The planet had emitted a continuous signal that seemed to contain a very comprehensive history of their world. As far as we could tell, their species first surfaced 10 million years ago, and has reached a level of technology that is so far beyond our own, that we can't even begin to understand it. They make no mention of war, but they talked about a defense grid around their system, one that had been ineffective against a threat mentioned on several accounts. The most approximate translation of this threat has been termed the Iudex. Since the last distress signal in 2011, their planet fell silent. It was a heartbreaking discovery, to finally find intelligent life other than our own, only to have it extinguished immediately. The more horrifying fact, however, was that their demise wasn't one of their own making. No, their end had come at the hands of a far superior species, one able to travel through space only to wage war and destruction. Yet, despite their end, a final message was sent through Voyager 1. One that wasn't calling for help, or giving us a detailed history, or ideas on how to reach them. Instead, they left us with a final warning, a simple message, and a translation key. All they said was, "Third story. I work at NASA. We made alien contact yesterday. I can't tell you who I am, and I can't tell you the name of the program, but what I can tell you is that if what they say is true, we're in trouble. Now, we didn't make contact in the way you would think we would. We didn't beam out an episode of The Office towards Andromeda and hear back from alien critics. And we definitely didn't meet them face to face. We found another way to communicate. Something, apparently ancient humans had figured out as well. There are countless dilapidated ancient structures around the world, and some of them, not all, but some, were communication arrays. At least a handful on each continent. I'm sure you'll be able to think of a few after I describe what we did. We've been working on this technology for a while. There has been a long-standing theory that sound has a much larger part in the universe than just being random vibrations. That the universe is simply a bunch of vibrations and sound, and if you find a way to manipulate those vibrations properly, you could do things that seem impossible. We proved that yesterday. By creating an extremely precise echo chamber, and playing certain frequencies into it, at precisely the right volumes, and the exact right timings, we broke some sort of barrier. Nothing really happened, visually at least. We had run countless tests like these with tiny, minute differences, and this one seemed pretty mundane. There was a slight unnatural thrumming, the glass between us and the echo chamber shook in regular intervals as if we were playing a bass-heavy song too loudly. The first thing that tipped us off that something was happening was that once we turned the speakers off, the thrumming didn't stop. My 3 co-workers and I could all feel this thrumming in our chests still, kind of like being next to a very loud drum. We talked for a moment, before we all fell silent. There was something else now. It wasn't a voice. It was some sort of intelligent vibration. I can't explain it. It was like a voice was inside my chest, but it wasn't speaking, I could just feel what it was saying. My cohorts and I debated on the exact wording afterwards, but we all agreed on the overall messages each time. Like I said, they weren't really talking, so I'll do my best to phrase it in ways that get across what they said, in the way they said it. Whoa, you guys are back. Is what I felt in my chest. My colleagues and I stared at each other in utter confusion. One of them spoke up. Hello? He asked hesitantly. There was a silence for a moment, before the thrumming spoke back. I think I have it set right now, say that again. Hello. I repeated back to it in place of the other scientist. Yep, there it is. He said quickly. You guys figured it out again. That's crazy. It exclaimed. This wasn't what I was thinking the first human/alien conversation was going to go. I wasn't even sure that this was first contact at this point though. Who is this? What is this? I asked loudly into the open air of our control room. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to give you details like who we are, but what this is the ultimate form of communication in our universe. Your ancestors figured it out briefly too. With some quick deduction on how it was wording things, I think each of us figured out what we were talking to was alien in origin around the same time. Where are you from? I asked. You have to be close. Hell, with the way we were talking back and forth, they had to be really close. It takes communications to Mars a few minutes to get there, just because that's as fast as light is. If we were talking this quickly back and forth, they basically had to be on Earth. I guess you wouldn't know. We didn't tell your ancestors. We didn't think they'd get it. Let me do some math real quick. It was about a minute before it spoke again. What you see as your observable universe, that's not the whole universe. Not even close. Multiply that by about 15, and that's about how far we are away. And there's a lot past that. We all looked at each other. It was speaking utter bullshit to us now. That was impossible, we'd never be able to communicate, ever. Physically impossible. We explained that to the chest voice, and we were met by an equal level of confusion. Why are you still using light as a yardstick? It asked incredulously. Suddenly, its voice grew slightly dire. You're still not advanced enough. You don't even know. Know what? One of my friends asked. You are dead center in the life abyss. There is no life on any planet around you, for more than 10 of your observable universes around you in any direction. It's a universal mystery how you're even alive. It spoke grimly. Never in my life had I felt smaller, more insignificant and more alone. It continued. And there is a reason for that. Fourth story. This story was shared by you/head of Spectre. I work for an organization that monitors extraterrestrial life. Something has escaped. The overpowering stench of burning flesh filled my nostrils the moment I walked into the Lakeshore police station. It was a smell I knew all too well, and it told me exactly what had happened there. The forensic team on the scene was still cleaning up the bodies. From what I could see, they were all burned beyond recognition, reduced down to little more than blackened husks. The team had set up floodlights to illuminate the darkened building, and standing amongst the lights was a single figure, smoking a cigarette. I walked up beside him, my eyes drawn down toward one of the smoldering skeletons on the ground. The man took another drag on his cigarette before looking at me. You know, I've seen my fair share of bodies, more than most people have, and each time I can't help but mourn a little bit for the poor bastard who got their ticket punched just because they were in the wrong place, at the wrong time. He said. It's part of the job, I replied plainly. So I'd recommend you make your peace with it, Agent Whitlow. Gary Whitlow scoffed. Hell of a cold way of looking at it, Audrey. Just Vogel is fine, I corrected. Walk me through the scene, please. Whitlow took another tense drag on his cigarette before making his way toward the back of the police station. We've got 24 bodies. 22 confirmed members of the Lakeshore Police Department, 2 in the holding cells. The scene was discovered about 5 hours ago by another officer. We're thinking he got here shortly after the attack, although so far we've turned up no actual witnesses. I see, I replied as Whitlow led me into the area with the holding cells. They'd already bagged the bodies there. The attackers entered through a hole in the ceiling. The burn marks on the holes seem consistent with the marks we've seen in similar cases. After that, it was a goddamn massacre. We've done a full sweep of the station, but with all the damage it's hard to tell what's evidence and what isn't. We'll need a couple of days to go through everything. Pack everything up and move it to the London office, I said. We can't afford to stay here for a few days. Already gave the order, Whitlow said. Good, I looked in through the bars of the cell at one of the body bags. Any idea what they were after? Nope, Whitlow replied. But they wouldn't do something like this without a damn good reason. Too high risk. I moved on to the next cell, which was empty, before looking over at the other body bag in the cell beside it. The doors to all 3 cells hung open, although the empty one in front of me looked broken. How did you get into the cells? I asked, swaying the door gently back and forth. One of the surviving officers got us the keys. You didn't need to break open any of the doors, then? I asked as I looked back at him. Whitlow caught on to what I was saying and got closer, inspecting the broken door with me. The lock looked old and was fairly rusted. It wouldn't have been that hard to break it with a bit of force. Considering how a small town like Lakeshore probably only used these cells as a drunk tank, I couldn't imagine they would have put that much effort into guaranteeing their maintenance. I'll see if I can find a record of who was in here, Whitlow said before leaving me. I nodded and let him go. I honestly wasn't sure if he'd find anything at all. I suppose it was possible that this cell was either already broken, or that whoever had broken out had simply died like the rest elsewhere in the building. Although if they hadn't, if someone had escaped the slaughter at the Lakeshore police station, that was someone I was going to need to talk to. I think my grandfather was the first one to find them. If there was anyone else before him, I've never heard of them. But with that said, given the nature of what he found, not a lot of people have heard of him either. The name, Conrad Vogel, isn't exactly forgotten to history, but few people are familiar with it. Those that are, probably only know the Conrad Vogel Institute for Meteorology and Atmospheric Science. My grandfather formed the institute in Berlin in 1961, and while the institute does perform legitimate meteorological research, that is not its primary purpose. In the late 1950s, as the Americans and Soviets raced to the moon, my grandfather noticed something else up amongst the stars. Decades of radio waves and television signals sent thoughtlessly into the void had yielded a response. A lone message that was ignored by most on Earth, save for one man who just so happened to record part of the broadcast as it played on his radio. He would later bring that recording to my grandfather, trying to understand just what it was that he'd heard. I've heard a version of the recording for myself, and it's hard to properly describe it. In a lot of ways it sounds almost like music, although not made with any instrument I've ever heard of. It sounds almost like those recordings of astral bodies, put together from sound waves transmitted from various probes shot out into space. Although while the audio form of those sound waves are droning sounds, echoing on forever, the recording that my grandfather received has a vastly different profile to it. It's clearly not something natural. Something created it, and they did so with purpose. It took my grandfather a couple of years to understand the message behind it all, but in time he pieced it together, and what he found only amounted to two words: silence. Supremacy. Those two words were what birthed the Vogel Institute. In the decades since, we have learned so much more. We now know that we are not alone in the universe, and we know that they have already found us. We've taken to calling them the Supremacy, based on the message my grandfather received, although in recent years I've heard some people call them the Auras. Personally, I don't think it matters what name they go by. It doesn't change the fact that they're out there and that we know precious little about them. Why they're interested in us, what they want, or where they come from. We have theories, but little more than that. All we know is that they are, and judging by what I saw at the police station, something had riled them up. After Whitlow left, I took a quiet tour of the rest of the police station. There were cameras all over the place, although I doubted they'd caught anything. In the decade that I've spent examining incidents with the Supremacy, I've never once had a case where they were caught on camera. They're too smart for that. Usually, they'll disable any electrical devices before they show themselves. I'm not entirely sure how they do it. Some sort of EMP pulse, I think. Maybe if we ever got our hands on some of their tech, we might be able to figure it out. But they've never left anything behind for us to find. Even if one of their own is killed, the body and whatever they'd been carrying would burn away to nothing the moment they left. It was some sort of fail-safe, I think, and it made researching them damn near impossible. They wanted us to know as little about them as possible, and they were very good at their job. Walking through the ruined police station, I couldn't help but regard the burned walls with a quiet frustration. The Supremacy hadn't burned this building to the ground, but they may as well have. Much like the bodies, all that was left was basically the skeleton with some charred flesh still clinging to it. I tried to picture how the massacre had gone down, but it was hard to piece it together into some kind of comprehensible form. The only thing that was obvious was that they had come, they had killed, and they had left, probably all in the span of a few minutes. I'd seen death before. When you're dealing with the supremacy, dealing with scenes like this is part of the job. But I'd never seen an attack this brutal before, and while I tried to keep as level a head as possible, I couldn't pretend for an instant that it didn't scare me a little. "Audrey?" Whitlow said from behind me, and I turned to see him standing in the doorway. I'd wandered toward some of the back offices, although aside from another body bag there wasn't much to see. "I think we found something." I nodded and let him lead me back to the front office where one of the other agents had gotten one of the computers working. We managed to pull up a record of the people they had in the cells at the time of the attack. "Looks like there was someone in the broken cell," he said. "Do we have a name?" I asked. "No, but we've got video." That would suffice. One of the other agents was sitting by a computer in the front office area. They already had the video ready to go. "Play it," Whitlow said. The agent nodded, before letting the video play. It had clearly been taken from one of the cameras by the cells, and in the video, I could see that 3 of them were occupied. 2 by middle-aged men who were obviously drunk and engaged in some sort of argument, and in the cell between them was a girl, somewhere in her mid-20s. She had short dark hair and shifty eyes. While the men in the cells beside her argued, she paced like a wild animal, constantly looking for the guards. As the video went on, I noticed her pacing growing more frantic. She was clearly spooked by something. I saw the men in the other cells pausing, looking around at something. When they paused, the girl seemed to grow even more distressed. I saw her frantically going through her cell, before finally ripping the mattress off of her little cot and trying to drag the cot over to the door, using it as a makeshift battering ram to get herself out. The video cut out before she got the door open, but judging by the state we'd found her cell in, I figured she'd succeeded. "Looks like she was already anxious before the attack," I noted, "and she was fighting to get out right before the supremacy showed up." "You think she knew they were coming?" Whitlow asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Get a screenshot of her face and send it out to the local authorities. I want all eyes looking for her." "You think she made it out of the police station?" "I don't know," I said again. "But right now she's our only lead." Whitlow nodded, and the agent scrolled back through the video to find a better shot of her face. "Do we know what she was in here for?" I asked. "Vagrancy," Whitlow replied. "I found a police report that said they found her squatting in some backroad motel." "Give me the address," I said. "I want to go and take a look." He looked over at the agent by the computer, who clicked into the police report. 1143, Oak Rail Road. He said. I thanked him, and left him and Whitlow to their work. Part of me was almost relieved to have left the police station behind. The sickly aroma of burning still stagnated in the air around me as I drove down to the abandoned motel, clinging to my clothes like a disease. Once upon a time, it would have left me gagging and dry heaving. Admittedly, there'd been a few times in the police station where I'd held my breath in a half-hearted attempt to avoid breathing it in. It wouldn't do me any good to let the stench get to me. It wouldn't do me any good to let any of it get to me. Whitlow may have said I was cold, but one needs to be cold when dealing with the kind of things we work with. If each new horror doesn't erode away a little part of your soul, you probably didn't have much of a soul to begin with. The motel looked as if it had seen better days. The building itself was run down, with broken windows and a cracked parking lot. There were a few abandoned, rusted cars near the back of the lot that were probably long past any hope of ever being repaired. As I parked on the far side of the lot, the sky above me was gray and threatening to rain. I opened my glove box and took out the pistol I kept inside. I wasn't sure what I expected to find here, but I didn't want to be unprepared. I got out and made my way toward the motel, studying the boarded-up windows and broken doors. As far as I could tell, there wasn't a single sign of life here, although I wasn't so naive as to think that meant I was alone. I started at one of the empty rooms on the far side of the motel. The door was unlocked and swung open when I prodded at it, revealing an empty room inside. Most of the furniture was gone and I spotted a few used needles on the ground in amongst the scattered garbage. The next few rooms were in just about the same state. This place looked like it had been abandoned for years. Room 5 was different, though. The door was unlocked, just like the rest. But it looked as if someone had been living there up until recently. The bed had some mismatched sheets on it. There were garbage bags that looked to have been packed full of someone's personal items. A few pieces of mismatched furniture set around the room contributed to the feeling that this was a space that was cobbled together but comfortably functional. There was even a hot plate, an electric kettle and some bowls on a nightstand that looked like they'd been used fairly recently. I examined the kettle and the hot plate. Both were battery operated and still in working order. Most of the bowls were clean, save for one which still had some instant ramen in it. I held my hand close to the side of the kettle. It was still warm. Somebody had boiled water in there recently. Very recently. I looked around. The room I was in seemed empty and there wasn't really anywhere to hide. The bathroom, perhaps, although from where I was standing I could see that the door was wide open and the shower curtain was pulled back. Odds are that nobody was hiding in there. My eyes shifted toward the bed. I grabbed the side and pushed it, exposing the bare carpet underneath. Nothing. Perhaps she'd left before I got there. But if so, she'd left a hell of a lot behind. It didn't make sense. Not unless. I heard movement behind me and turned just in time to see the bathroom door moving and a figure emerging from behind it. I felt something connect with my head as I was sent down to the ground, gripping the bed for support to keep myself from falling completely. My ears were ringing as I looked up, just in time to see the girl from the police station sprinting out the door as fast as her legs would carry her. I forced myself to my feet to follow her, and stumbled out the door behind her. The girl was almost on the other side of the parking lot and about to jump the fence, leading into some farmer's field. I went after her, as fast as I could. She'd already made it over the fence by the time I got there, but the act of climbing it had cost her precious time. Getting over the fence was easier for me than it was for her, and as soon as I was over I continued my pursuit. I saw her looking back at me, eyes wide and frantic. Looking back proved to be another mistake. She stumbled and almost fell, letting me gain that much more ground on her. I was closing the distance and she knew it. I could see a police baton in her hand. She gripped it tightly as she realized that she couldn't outrun me, getting ready for a fight. And when I finally reached her, she took her first swing at my head. I was ready for it, this time. I caught the baton before it could touch me, before using her own momentum to force her down to the ground. One moment she was standing and the next she was flat on her back, limbs flailing as she let out a panicked cry. I tore the baton away from her and tossed it aside, keeping her pinned to the ground as she struggled. Let me go. Let me go. Just relax. I tried to say, pushing her back down into the dirt when she tried to get free again. I noticed the glint of a knife as she wrestled it out of her pocket and grabbed her by the wrist, pinning it to the ground. Relax. I repeated and got kneed in the stomach for my troubles. Get off of me. She spat, fighting like a cornered animal. I had to throw all of my weight onto her to keep her down. Get off. They'll kill you too. Like they killed the people at the police station? I asked. Yes. Now let me go. Not until you tell me what happened, I said. Now relax, relax. Her struggles were growing weaker. Her breathing was heavy as she stared at me. You wouldn't believe me, she panted. I wouldn't believe me. Try me, I said. She was silent, trying to catch her breath and refusing to even look at me. We know the supremacy were at the police station. Now what did you see? I said. Her eyes finally moved, focusing on me now. Mentioning the supremacy had gotten her attention. You know about them? She asked warily. I know about them, I repeated. Now, if I let you go, are we gonna discuss this like adults, or do I have to chase you down a second time? She didn't answer that. I pried the knife from her hand before deciding to give the girl the benefit of the doubt and getting off of her. She rolled onto her stomach before picking herself up, although this time she didn't run. She just glared at me, untrusting and anxious. The police station, I said. What did you see? Nothing, she replied. I got out before they came. But I saw the lights in the sky from the forest, and I ran before they could find me. So you knew they were coming? I asked. I tried to tell the officers. I told them that they'd find me there. They know how to look through the security cameras. It's why it's so hard to hide from them. I told the police that they'd come. They didn't listen. I was safe, back at the motel. They never found me there, and I know that they looked. Yeah, well, if I was able to find you at that motel, odds are they probably will too, I said. Either way, you're compromised. I know, she said. I was just getting ready to leave when you showed up. Leave for where? Anywhere. Just away from here. I couldn't blame her for that. You have a name? I asked. She hesitated for a moment before answering. B, she finally said, I go by B. Alright, B. My name's Audrey. Audrey Vogel. You come with me, I can find you a better, safer place to lay low and maybe you can answer some questions I've got. Okay. If you know about the supremacy, then you should know that there's not a chance in hell that you can hide me from them, she said. The only thing you're going to do is get yourself killed. B, odds are that right now I'm the only person who has the slightest chance of hiding you from the supremacy, I replied. Now if you really want to, you can turn and run away to find some other abandoned building to hide in all by yourself and continue to hope that they don't find you. Or, you can come with me, and know that it won't just be me protecting you. You will have the protection of my entire organization. That, I can promise you. What makes you think you'll do any better than the police did? B asked coldly. Because unlike them, we know what's out there. Now, what's it gonna be? B stared mistrustfully at me before I saw the tension draining from her shoulders. The first few drops of rain were starting to fall. She looked out at the field around us. For miles around, there seemed to be nothing but empty field, a few scattered farmhouses with a small number of gas stations, diners and other run-down motels between them. None of them were better alternatives than what was right in front of her. Fine, she finally said, her voice uneasy. But if they come for me, when they come for me, I hope you're ready. I did too. The safe house by the London office was quaint, to say the least. I'd never had a reason to go inside before, but it was the obvious safe place to keep B. My grandfather had requested the safe houses be constructed for any situation where we had a potential witness that the supremacy might try to take back. The one in the London office was located at the very center of the building, with no windows and only one door that could be sealed in case of emergency. The decor was fairly reminiscent of a hotel room, hence why I called it quaint, although, so long as it served its purpose, I couldn't have given less of a shit about the decor. As far as I knew, the safe houses never really been tested before. They'd only ever been used to keep people of interest who the supremacy probably couldn't have cared less about. I had no idea how effective they'd really be, and part of me hoped we wouldn't have to find out. Whitlow had brought some clean clothes for Bea, and while she showered and got changed, he and I waited in the hall outside. "So she thinks they were after her, huh?" he asked. Without a cigarette to smoke, he didn't seem to know what to do with his hands. "She was convinced, although I didn't exactly have the time to ask for the full story," I replied. "She's more informed than the usual witnesses we deal with though. She seems to know what we're up against. I'll do a full debrief after she's settled." Whitlow nodded. "Fair enough. You gonna need anything else, then?" he asked. "Food would be nice. I don't think this girl has had a decent meal in a while." "I'll see what I can find," he said. In the meanwhile, I put in a request to post a few additional guards around the building. After that scene at the police station, I'm not sure how much good they'll do if push comes to shove. But maybe if we're lucky the numbers will scare them off. At minimum, we at least are relatively sure that the supremacy aren't going to make any moves in broad daylight. Which gives us what? Another 8 hours with the girl? I checked my watch. It was close to noon. Should be plenty of time. "Yeah, well, you do your thing, Audrey. I'll be around," Whitlow said. "Just Vogel is fine," I corrected, and he chuckled. "Sorry kiddo, you'll always be Audrey to me." My annoyed expression didn't seem to dissuade him, but I really shouldn't have been surprised by his attitude. Whitlow had been in this line of work far longer than I had. Once upon a time, he'd even worked closely with my father. He probably still thought of me as just a kid. Part of me couldn't blame him for that. Admittedly, that familiarity was why I'd wanted to work with him in the first place. I sighed and turned to go back into the safe house. The bathroom door was open and the clothes on the bed were gone. I didn't see any trace of Bea, but I could still hear her. It sounded like she was in the middle of brushing her teeth. I went to the bathroom door to check in on her. After a hot shower and a change of clothes, she looked almost like a completely different person. She looked over at me, before spitting and rinsing off her toothbrush. "Feeling better?" I asked. "Yeah," she replied, before finishing up. She stepped out of the bathroom and flopped down into one of the chairs by the desk, watching me intently as she did. "I've spoken with my colleague, Mr. Whitlow. He'll be back to bring you something to eat shortly," I said. "While we wait for him though, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind answering some questions. You want to know how much I know about the supremacy?" she asked. I nodded. With the exception of a few government officials, the handful of people on this planet who are aware of their existence all belong to the same organization that I do. We take considerable care in ensuring that word about their existence doesn't get out. Easier to avoid a mass panic that way. "Look, I didn't find out through your organization," Bea said. "I don't even know who the hell you people are." "You can call us the Vogel Institute," I said. "And if you're not familiar with us, then how did you find out about the supremacy?" B was silent again as if she was unsure if she should tell me. Look, you and I are in a safe house hiding from aliens right now. There's nothing you can tell me that is going to sound crazy, I promise. I know, she said softly. I don't know where to even begin. Well, let's start with your first encounter, I said. When did you first come across the supremacy? I've always known about the supremacy, she replied. It was this place that I had to discover. I paused, not entirely sure what she meant. For as long as I can remember, they've been there. It wasn't just them. There were other people, but they were always watching us. Sometimes they took us, studied us, then let us go again. We didn't know that there was anything outside of the facility. It was just the way we lived. I'm sorry, facility? I asked. What facility? Were there others like you? I only started piecing it all together after I got out, B admitted. That was about 3 years ago, give or take. But the place I grew up in, the town, she trailed off, struggling to find the words. I think it was some kind of laboratory. I only really saw the part that we lived in, which was kind of like a small town, only there wasn't any real sunlight. When you looked up, you couldn't see the sky. Just the ceiling. The lights were on in the day and off at night. That was all we knew. This facility, where is it located? I asked quietly. To the north, but beyond that I couldn't tell you. Even if I could, I don't imagine it would matter. They've probably moved it since I got out. I see. What else do you remember about the facility? I asked. There were a few hundred of us. It was sort of a little community. Everyone had their own house. We mostly all got along just fine, going about our days. Looking back, I guess it was pretty peaceful. Although every now and then, someone would disappear. They had ways of taking people without anyone noticing. I don't really remember how it happened. One minute you'd be fine and the next, everything would just sort of go black. Usually you'd wake up somewhere else, not even knowing that something had happened to you. But sometimes you'd wake up just long enough to see them. She shuddered. The things they did, the surgeries. I only remember fragments from the times when I woke up, and even those are too much. I've heard similar accounts from other abductees, I said softly. They supremacy are certainly scientifically minded. That's one way of putting it, I guess. She said. They didn't really interact with us one-on-one. If they had to talk to us, they'd send someone in. They called themselves administrators. They looked sort of like one of us, human, that is. But there was always something off about them. Something wrong with the way they never stopped smiling and the way they spoke. They were too enthusiastic. It was off-putting. The administrators always referred to the people they were speaking for as the supremacy, and I guess that's just what we called them at the facility. They told us that we were helping the supremacy with their research, and they told us that they'd take care of all of our needs. Most of the others bought it, they just accepted it, and smiled on like nothing was wrong. But not you? I asked. Not me. I wasn't the only one either. One of my friends, E-144, he was terrified of them. Terrified of what they were doing to us. I think he remembered the surgeries better than most of us did, and every time somebody disappeared and didn't come back, more people started listening to him. He kept saying we needed to either get out or die trying. That this was no way to live, and after he finally disappeared, people got scared. We were all afraid that we'd be next. E-144, not even a real name. Just a letter and a number. I caught myself grimacing at the thought of that. How did you escape? I asked. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure how it happened, B admitted. I know that our 321 and C-102 had found some books in our library that told them how to make explosives out of the plant fertilizer we had. The Supremacy weren't exactly that mindful of what they gave us to read, so I don't think they realized what they were up to until it was too late. Then one night, I woke up to this loud popping noise. I think someone had caught the Supremacy while they were taking someone, but I didn't see what happened. All I know is that there was a hole in the wall, and some of the others were trying to get out. I saw my chance and I figured I might as well take it. After that, it's all a blur. I remember running through the halls, I remember seeing those black-eyed things coming after us. I remember people dying, the smell of burning, and then I found a door and got out. As soon as I tasted fresh air, I just started running as fast as I could. I didn't know if I'd gotten away until the sun finally came up. Ever since then, I've just kept moving. I've had a few close calls, but up until some platinum blonde lady chased me down and pounded me into the ground, I was doing just fine. I couldn't help but crack a dull smile at that. Well, I'll do what I can to make that up to you, I said. If you don't mind me asking, do you remember anything before the facility? Anything at all? There was no before the facility, she replied. You were born there, and you died there. There weren't a lot of natural births either. The Supremacy didn't like us doing things that way. Usually anytime somebody got pregnant, they took it. People would just be assigned children instead. But the kids that they gave us, not all of them were fully human. The less human ones usually died, and with the fully human ones. I don't know exactly where they came from. But I'm pretty sure they weren't from the pregnancies they stole. H-205 had a theory that they were making them somehow. He thought that was how the Supremacy did it for themselves. But why they'd make babies for us just doesn't. I don't know why they do that. Again I found myself grimacing at the thought of potential answers to that question. So you didn't know much about the kind of research they were doing there? I asked. Do people usually tell the animals they're studying what it is what they're researching? B asked. I don't know exactly what they were doing there, but I know that we were nothing more than test subjects to them. We lived and we died for their research. I found myself shifting uneasily at the thought of countless others, living in the hell that B had just described. She was still staring at me intently, and looking into her eyes I saw the memories of 1,000 horrors she hadn't even begun to describe just yet. Horrors she would need to share with me, horrors I needed to hear, even if I didn't want to. It was part of the job, after all. I took detailed notes on everything that B described to me over the next hour, and when Whitlow returned with lunch, we ate together. B took the opportunity to ask me some questions off the record, and that conversation was thankfully a lot more light-hearted. If the Supremacy handled most of your day-to-day necessities, what exactly did you do in your spare time? I asked. I imagine you had a lot of it. Whatever we felt like, I guess, she said. Gardening and tending to the animals we kept was just about the only work we had to do, otherwise, we found ways to pass the time. Games, stories, talking, reading, among other things. Bored people find ways to kill the time, if you catch my meaning. It took me a moment before I did, although I thought I saw a ghost of a smile on her lips when the realization hit me. You're awfully red, did you want to touch on that, in the next part of your debrief? She teased. Let's just try and stay on topic, I said, making a point to still sound professional. Bea laughed, and it was admittedly kind of cute hearing her laugh. I gathered up the garbage from lunch to take it out. I'll be back with some water, I said. Then we can continue with our dash. A loud ringing alarm cut me off before I could continue, and the moment I heard it, I felt my heart sink deeper into my chest. "What's that?" Bea asked, standing up from her chair. Immediately she was tense again, and I suspected she already knew the answer. "Is it them? Did they find me?" "It's still broad daylight," I said under my breath before I ran for the door, looking back toward Bea as I did. "Stay in here," I warned. "If they get too close, seal the door behind me. Use this button right here, okay?" I gestured to the button in question, and with that, I stepped out into the hall. Immediately, the familiar smell of burning filled my nostrils. It was them. I knew it. A pair of agents tore past me down the hall, headed for the stairs. "What's the situation?" I demanded, stopping one of them. "I don't know," he replied. "Report said something came in through the roof. Last we heard they were in the stairwell." "In the stairwell already?" They were making a beeline for the girl. "I thought we'd have more time. I thought this location would have been safer." "Go," I said, letting them continue on. I almost followed them, but it was better if I stayed by the door. There was a very good chance I'd soon be the last line of defense between them and Bea, and while I didn't know what my chances were, I didn't want to trust the job to anyone else either. The two agents took off toward the stairs again, and I watched them go, keeping my gun at the ready. I could hear the distant sizzle of flesh just seconds later, accompanied by dying screams. They were close. I took aim at the door, waiting for it to swing open, and the moment it did I started shooting. The first figure who came through was shaped almost like a man, although the limbs seemed too long and the head seemed too big. It wore some kind of environmental suit, with a smooth chrome helmet. In one three-fingered hand, it held some sort of gun. I'd studied these things all my life. This was the first time I'd ever seen one in person. I didn't have much time to think about it though. The instant it so much as noticed me, I blew it away, firing 2 rounds into its chest. It died just like anything else did. 2 more took its place, and I shot blindly at them, killing one and wounding the other, which pulled back abruptly, although more were already taking its place. I kept shooting. I know I killed a few more, but it hardly mattered. The moment one got a shot off, I knew I was dead. I can't say I'd made my peace with that, but it was part of the job. A sudden hail of gunfire erupted behind me. I flinched, looking back to see Whitlow coming down the hall, an automatic rifle in hand. "Vogel, into the safe room," he barked. I ignored him, watching as the surviving figures retreated back into the stairwell. "No, I'm with you," I replied. I saw something metal rolling out into the hall. Light pulsated from it. I didn't need to know a damn thing about alien technology to figure out that it was probably some kind of explosive. Whitlow glared down at it, before looking back at me. "Sorry kiddo, but you're too young to die," he said, before rushing to push me toward the safe house door again. I tried to protest, but the door flew open behind me. I could see Bea standing beside it, and I watched her hit the button. "Wait," I called, but it was too late. The door shut and locked tight behind me, and the ground quaked violently as whatever explosive they'd just thrown into the hall detonated. "Gary," I said, my voice cracking a little bit. I looked over at B, who stared at the door, her eyes wide with terror. She looked back at me, unsure what to say, although I don't suppose words mattered at that moment. The door to the safe house shook. I could hear the faint sound of movement on the other side. They were looking for a way in. B backed away from the door, while I clutched my gun, standing at the ready in case they got through. But they never did. The faint sound of automatic gunfire sounded in the hall. I could hear the fighting. I could hear the screams of dying men. I could smell the burning. And when the silence came several minutes later, I waited for the assault on the door to begin again. It never did. Several minutes later, the phone in my pocket simply buzzed. I took it out, and was greeted with a single message. All clear. Just like that, it was over. Even now, I'm not sure if it was dumb luck, or some manner of skill that we managed to repel an assault by the supremacy. Perhaps it was simply a combination of both. Either way, I wouldn't gamble on surviving another assault from them. Next time, they'll be coming in force. I've submitted everything I got from B to my superiors. They determined that it wasn't safe to keep her in London and have opted to move her elsewhere for the time being. Naturally, I volunteered to be her personal escort. I did it partially because I know that the girl trusts me. It will be easier on her if she's with someone she feels safe with, although that's not the only reason. The supremacy will come for her again, this I'm sure of. And when they do, I'd like another shot to settle the score with them. Fifth story. This story was shared by Nick Boddick. My new neighbors are weird. Last week, the neighbors that have lived next to me since I moved into my house moved out, after several months of having their home on the market. After they left, the house sat empty for a few days, and finally, the new neighbors moved in. They seemed average enough, a white couple in their mid to late 30s, with a daughter that must be about 6 or 7. While they were in the process of emptying the truck that contained all their belongings, I stopped over at their new home to introduce myself before heading to the store. Paul and Mary seemed very kind, and their daughter Andrea was as pleasant as could be. We had a back and forth that consisted of basic introductions, cliché pleasantries, and the like. In hindsight though, something struck me as odd. Paul looked past me at my house, and commented on it. I really like your place, I very much admire the way you do things. I thanked him, we said our goodbyes, and I went on my way. In my rear view, I noticed the 3 of them waving to me until I was down the street, and out of view, which was admittedly kind of weird. I didn't see them again until I was doing some yard work yesterday. Here's where things kind of took a strange turn. I went to my shed and got out my cordless hedge trimmer for my front yard bushes. About 3 minutes later, Paul was in his front yard trimming his bushes as well. Not a big deal, surely just a coincidence. Paul and Mary's house is bigger than mine, with a noticeably bigger front lawn, therefore they have more bushes in front of their house. I got finished trimming mine, but Paul stopped when I did. He just left a few feet of bushes untouched and put his trimmer away the same time as me. I was kind of weirded out at this point, so I went inside. As did Paul. This was the first truly odd thing I noticed. I spent the night at my girlfriend's last night. I told her what happened and she encouraged me to just shrug it off. I went to work this morning and had a normal day, nothing striking me as weird until I left. About a block after I turned out of my job's parking lot, a car pulled up behind me. It followed me all the way home, and it turns out it was Paul. I was a little unsettled by this, but again chalked it up to random coincidence. But after I got out of my car, I got my mail. So did Paul. I went in my house, Paul went into his. This was beginning to thoroughly creep me out. Then, night came. My bedroom window faces what I assume to be the bedroom that Paul and Mary use. This is because I saw Paul through the window. I walked past mine, and a second later, Paul walked past his in the same direction. I walked back, so did Paul. I decided to test it. I walked back and forth 3 times, then stopped with my back to the window, and hopped once. Paul did the exact same thing I did each and every time, on about a 1-second delay. As Paul turned around from his hop, he looked me directly in my eyes and smiled a normal, toothy smile. And waved. The same wave he and his family had done when I left the day I met them. Not really sure what to make of all this, I will update as this develops.